Well, we've made it. Part 3, the final episode in the Capstone Research Project Literature Review Overview. So we've gone through the process of thinking about our topic, making sure that we're going to focus on being heavier with synthesis than summary. We've done some literature searches and sorted that literature into buckets and written about those buckets. Now it's time to do the real work of the literature review, the writing. So we need to think about the structure and organization of a literature review. As I've mentioned in part 2, we really want to think about our literature review as being a map for the reader. We want to use the literature that's existing as a way to guide the reader from the concept that we introduced in chapter 1, our introduction chapter, through to what's already been said related to the topic, to help give a clear sense of what our study's all about, the hole that we're going to fill in the existing literature, and ultimately how the literature informs and guides our own study. So as we think about writing the body of our literature review, I like to think about each bucket as being its own section. And each bucket should really have subsections as well. So let's say that we've pulled 20 articles related to a particular bucket, and we've written an outline. Chances are there's going to be a need to break things up into some distinct ways depending on the topic of that bucket. So we want to make sure we do that. So let's use some headings. The first paragraph for each bucket should serve as an introduction, and the last paragraph should serve as a conclusion and then transition to the next section or the next bucket. So let's think about transitions. We need to move from one topic to the next, but we don't want to do it abruptly. We don't want to just drop off talking about one topic and move on to the next bucket. We want to make sure that we are making connections. And if you've noticed, I've been repeating this concept of making connections through all these videos. It's because I think it's really important. We want to make connections not only from the literature to our own topic, but we need to make connections about all these different pieces of literature that we found and that we're writing about. So we want to make sure that we're making the reading of our document as easy as possible for the reader. But also, again, the literature is guiding us as scholars in formulating our own studies. So as we go through writing about each bucket and writing these transitions, that ultimately leads us to writing a conclusion for the literature review. I serve as a reviewer and on editorial boards for a few different scholarly publications. And one of the biggest mistakes I see with people writing manuscripts is they don't provide a proper conclusion to their writing. They just leave the reader hanging, and we don't want to do that. And we also don't want to leave it up to the reader to draw her own or his own conclusions. We want to wrap things up nicely and succinctly. We want to make sure that we've connected the dots and made the points that need to be made. And so as we think about writing in the style of synthesis, again, one of the purposes of synthesis style writing is it gives us as writers room for making interpretations of what we've read and making those connections from one piece of literature to the next. So it's really important to use the conclusion section of our literature review to tie all those loose pieces together. Hopefully we didn't leave too many loose pieces in the body of our literature review, but this is where we tie all those things together and make sure that we've made all those connections of all the different pieces of literature that we've drawn upon. And of course, we have to talk about APA. Now, I'm not going to spend time on APA, just like I didn't spend a whole lot of time on conducting literature searches, because again, Ms. Catherine Farmer has done a wonderful job of recording an overview video of using APA with particular emphasis on formatting. So I'm going to, again, provide a link to that video in the literature review resources section on our Canvas course page, so that you've got great access to a wonderful resource that Ms. Farmer has created. Also on Canvas is a link to the Purdue OWL. Hopefully you've utilized the Purdue OWL before, or at least been made aware of it in your courses. It's a great free resource from Purdue University up in Indiana that is free to anyone around the country and offers a lot of great tips on APA. And then one other resource that I really like is the folks at the APA Manual have their own blog that they maintain with a lot of tips and questions that they receive about maybe citing some obscure things. Or you find a great report from a government agency and what's in the APA 6th edition is not real clear to you. The style blog's got some great pointers. And then something else that you'll also find on Canvas is the rubric that the faculty will be using to evaluate your literature review portion of the CRP. So thank you for watching these 3 videos. I hope you found them to be informative. As you have questions about the literature review, whether it's brainstorming, questions about specifics, finding articles and resources, or simply how do I get started in writing, please be sure to reach out to Dr. Littlepage or myself.